Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to hold off just a minute here while our platform's letting everyone in, but thank you so much for joining. You can head to our chat, give us a greeting, let us know where you're tuning in from today. We would love to hear from you while we're just waiting for our platform here. Welcome, welcome. Great to see you all. I see our numbers growing. We're just holding off a minute while our platform's letting everyone in. I see those greetings coming in the chat. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from today and anything else you want to add in there. Oh, awesome. People from all over. Hello, hello. All right. Well, it looks like our numbers are slowing down and we have a great session ahead of us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us and welcome to today's webinar, The Nature Connection, collaborating to bring ecotherapy to your community. My name is Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the Public Education Associate at Mental Health America's National Office, and I'll be helping to moderate today's webinar. I have just a few notes for you before I introduce our speaker today. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. Also note, as you join, I'm sure you are aware, your video is automatically off and so is your audio, but we encourage you to use the chat to communicate through our presentation today. And also you can add any questions you have in there throughout the session. We'll be collecting those and we'll go through some with the time we have at the end. Another note is that we currently are not offering CEUs, but if you'd like to request a certificate of attendance, I do have a link that you can fill out to request one of those. I'll put that in the chat here shortly, and that will also be included in your follow-up email. And now I would love to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, Marissa Byers. Marissa is passionate about connecting people with the natural environment to improve mental health and well-being and inspire climate action. She graduated from Butler University with an environmental studies degree in 2018. Marissa was a 2021-2022 MHA Young Mental Health Leaders Council member, and her current collaborative work aims to help college students work with the natural resources around them and get outside to connect themselves, others, and their environment. You can learn more about Marissa at Ecotherapy for All, and her link will also be dropped in the chat here. And welcome, Marissa. We're so excited to have you here today. In honor of Earth Day coming up on Saturday, we figured this would be the perfect session to connect with you on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate the introduction. And I also appreciate all of you taking the time to join us ahead of Earth Day. Really get in the mood by talking about ecotherapy today. So maybe this is something you're already familiar with, already practicing, and want to see how it's happening at the local level. Maybe it's totally new to you, and that's even more exciting to me to be able to introduce a new community level practice to you. But today we're going to be diving into ways that you can collaborate within your community to make mental health in partnership with nature more accessible to more people. So we'll talk a little bit about what ecotherapy is, some of the theory behind it, as well as some of its benefits, and then some ways that that's happening here where I live in Indianapolis. To get started, just so we're all on the same page here, I'll provide a quick image description. I am a white woman with short brown hair. I'm wearing round brown glasses and a green t-shirt that says, I don't mind, as in I don't mind talking about mental health. And then my background's kind of a blurred out gray wall with a window behind me. I use she, her pronouns, and my background, as Jackie mentioned, is in environmental studies. So looking at the ways that humans interact with both our built environment and our natural or more than human environment. And I'm coming to you today, not as an expert, not as a licensed clinician or a researcher, but someone with a depth of investment in community care and harm reduction at that peer level. And I'm really just passionate about the ways that our relationship with nature can support stronger or better mental health for a variety of people. And the framework that I use to talk about most of these programs is a public health framework. So through the International Transformation Resilience Coalition, I learned about their model, which looks at using that public health or population level approach for communities to take care of our own mental health together, especially in the face of climate change. So I recommend looking at some of their materials if that's something that you're interested in as well. And also, before we get started today, I want to take some time for a land acknowledgement. Again, I'm in Indianapolis, which is the traditional and unceded lands of the Miami, Delaware, Potawatomi, and Shawnee peoples. And I mention this especially because when we're looking at ecotherapy and a relationship with our natural world, it's important to continue learning about how we can be better stewards of the natural world, especially ahead of Earth Day, how we can continue to dive into social justice through this practice, and also how we can celebrate the rich cultural connections that come up when we're working with or in nature. So I share this to not just acknowledge the history of the land that I'm on today, but also as an invitation as you dive into what ecotherapy could look like in your community to explore the history of the places where you live as well. To get us started today, I want to lead with a brief activity. Ecotherapy or nature mindfulness is really ripe with nature metaphors. So we're going to start with building your own ecosystem or your own web today. So in ecology, environmental work, webs are often used to map or visualize relationships. And as we know, in advocacy or in mental health, so much of this work depends on relationships and being able to have support. So you're not doing this work alone. So grab a pen, a piece of paper. If you want to do this digitally, that's great too. If you want to just imagine it, I'm also okay with that. But we're going to be building your own mental health mission web, basically. So start by drawing maybe a spider web, maybe a wheel with a hub and spokes, if that's easier to visualize, and place yourself or write your name or your mental health mission in the center of that web. And I'll give you an example of what this is going to look like and how we're going to fill out this web. So this is my web. My mental health mission in the center is to connect more people with nature. And then on each strand of the web, I invite you to add experiences, people, organizations, or groups who you have either worked with in the past or are currently working with, or who could be potential partners for the work that you want to do when it comes to supporting mental health. So I'll give you some time to fill out your web, but also if there's any particularly inspiring people that you want to put in the chat, I would love for you to do that as well. On my map here, I've got my Young Mental Health Leaders Council experience, a mindfulness hiking guide training I've done, but also the names of people who have championed this work at the local level and some places where these projects are happening. So give you a little bit of time to start writing that out. And again, if there's anything you want to share in the chat as you're reflecting on the ways that you're supported in your work, feel free. Thanks, Jane, for sharing. I've got Jane Goodall as an inspiration. Strong Jane power there. All right, so for today, we're gonna move on, but hopefully, I know that 30 seconds is really not enough time to reflect on all the different people and experiences that support the work that you do. So hopefully this is something that you can return to later and reflect on so you can build out that full web. As we're looking at these networks or a web in this case, each strand that you are connected to strengthens the work that you do. So, or strengthens the overall web itself and the impact that we can have in our communities. So I'll invite you to take some time to think about that throughout the day. And since so much of this work is focused on community and togetherness, I want to invite you to just take a breath together with everyone on this call today. So with me, take a breath in and a breath out. I just think it's cool to be able to share that moment or that experience with people all across the country today. So thanks for participating there. I want us to all be on the same page about what ecotherapy is as I'm talking about it today. And so I'll start by defining ecotherapy as sort of an umbrella term for many nature-based mental health practices. Ecotherapy, as I define it or use it today, is intentional time spent in nature for its restorative and biopsychosocial benefits. So the way that it helps your body, your mind, and your relationships. Ecotherapy can be practiced in many different settings. It can be one-on-one or in a group. It could be done independently or as a guided or facilitated experience. And it can also be practiced in clinical settings as well as community settings. And some more specific examples of what that actually looks like. I have a list here. Walk and talk therapy is one way that clinicians or school counselors are starting to incorporate the natural environment into their work. Sometimes it's easier for a client to be able to talk about a hard experience when they're looking at trees and moving their body instead of sitting and staring into someone's eyes while they're having to recount something hard or reflect on something challenging. Recreation or adventure therapy, think going camping or whitewater rafting with different prompts and activities specifically built to increase confidence or self-esteem in youth, or even help folks with PTSD address some of their symptoms or develop coping skills. There are a lot of interesting ways that recreation therapy has been implemented and studied. One of those that I've interacted with is for youth whose families are affected by substance abuse, bringing all of those people with shared experience together out at camp for a weekend and giving them the ability to interact with peers while also processing the variety of emotions that come with that life experience. Animal-assisted therapy or horticultural therapy works with animals and plants to benefit mental health. And then what you've probably heard of before, Shinrin-yoku or forest bathing, and similarly nature-based mindfulness involves engaging all of your senses really deeply and intentionally in a natural space. And nature-based mindfulness is what most of our case studies will focus on today. As far as kind of the science behind ecotherapy, there are a couple of main theories behind this connection between our nature and our health as humans. One of those is evolution. So for the entirety of humanity as a species, we have evolved with and alongside the natural settings that we've lived in. And nature, even though we don't quite see those relationships as directly, is what meets all of our needs when it comes to sustenance and shelter. And so our bodies, our brains have evolved with the patterns of nature that we experience, such as migration or seasons or even time of day. And nature has also had a large significance in our cultural and religious traditions, since we've spent so much time outside as a species that naturally is a part of those practices. E.O. Wilson built off of that evolutionary theory to talk about biophilia theory, which just says that we are drawn to nature, whether we know it or not. Green spaces, blue spaces are really attractive to us. Same thing with natural sounds, and we have this urge to connect with the more than human world, which could be, bird watching and being curious about the ways that birds hop around outside our windows, or even our relationship with our pets. And then Rachel and Stephen Kaplan formed the attention restoration theory, which suggests that we have a finite amount of attention for working on tasks, or even being in overstimulating environments, which can happen in a lot of urban settings where there's traffic and lights and noise. And so exposure to nature helps our brain shift into a more restorative setting for the rest of our body, and provides a lot of other benefits as well. And some of those individual benefits include decreasing stress and improved attention and rest focus, as I mentioned, but also improved mood or positive affect, creativity. It can improve our physical well-being. Often when we're spending time outside, we can be more active. So we're improving our immune system, decreasing our blood pressure, even improving our quality of sleep. It provides the opportunity for more social connection, not just with other people as you're spending time outside of your home, but also with a sense of something larger than yourself or connection with animals, as I mentioned. And it can also spark curiosity about the environment. The more time you spend outside, the more familiar you become with the phenomenon or the beings you find there, and start to develop often a relationship with that space, which can lead to a desire to protect it and advocate for conservation and some of the beneficial changes that we need to see in the face of climate change. So there are some benefits there too of just spending more time in nature, being more familiar with it, and wanting to make a difference in the future of our natural environment. Additionally, from the individual level, there are also community level benefits that come about from time in nature. The National Recreation and Park Association does these surveys that they call the Park Pulse. And so this one that I've got on the screen says that 86% of US adults believe it is helpful to have access to the outdoors and nature during stressful times. And it goes on to say that this is true across generations, that most people surveyed, from baby boomers to Gen Zers, agree that dealing with stress by accessing the outdoors is helpful. So when we look at having green spaces available as mental health supports, we see a couple of different benefits. One of them is the improved access to having mental health support. That doesn't necessarily have to be signing up for a relationship with a therapist or an app. It can be as simple as stepping outside. This also makes these programs more scalable. Instead of one clinician or one office being the one to offer these programs, now libraries and parks and other public spaces like school playgrounds can be involved. And that spreads, again, access to these resources. And there can also be some reduced stigma when you're going to a community program that is around something you're interested in with the benefit of mental health, versus going to specific mental health treatment. So that's another benefit that these resources can provide. Although I will take this opportunity to say that while there are great studies that demonstrate the impacts of nature for folks with anxiety or depression or PTSD, this is not necessarily a replacement for mental health treatment. So again, there's the importance of that balance between that clinical setting and treatment and relationship and the community support that these practices can provide. I know Mental Health America, especially through Mental Health Month in just a couple of weeks, will be focusing a lot on the social determinants of health, and a relationship with nature has a place there too. Ecotherapy can encourage more active living behaviors when you're spending time outside, moving around, and again, reduce social isolation since you have more opportunities like these people here at the park to connect with others, even if it's just being around others. And that awareness that is increased by the time that you spend in those public spaces can also, again, lead to a desire to improve our built environment. And lastly, there's a growing interest in and a need for mental health resources at this community or local level. And so parks, libraries, college campuses, public gardens, probably spaces I'm not naming that you can think of in your own area, all have a role in this movement. And again, the National Recreation and Park Association has a blog post with lists of ways that parks departments are addressing and responding to issues like reducing suicides or addressing veteran mental health in their own locales. So there's a lot of unique ways that this is happening, and each part of that is strengthening our web of resources. I also want to point out, I have placed an asterisk by the availability of park spaces or green spaces, because we know that not all parks are created equal, and we know that not all communities have the same access to these resources. Redlining, segregation, historic disinvestment in public spaces and public transportation are not things that we can gloss over when we are designing ecotherapy experiences. We have to be intentional to make sure that the resources or the programs we're designing are accessible to the participants or the community members that we want to engage. And so a couple of things to keep in mind as you're investigating what ecotherapy could look like where you live is, first of all, safety, and also perceived safety. What this might look like is a group dynamic. Are you one-on-one with a client in the woods? That might not always feel safe based on that person's lived experience. So what does a group dynamic look like? Or what time of day are you going to those spaces? And where is the sun? What's the lighting like? Where's the sun in the sky at that time? Even things like, are there sidewalks that connect to this park so that people can safely get to that green space? On that note, accessibility is another key factor to consider. What this might look like is thinking about the terrain if you're offering an outdoor program. Ecotherapy can be done indoors, I'll say that. A lot of hospitals do this really well with horticultural therapy. But I would say if you're doing an outdoor program, it's really important to be familiar with the space that you're in. And the more time you spend there, the more you notice factors like the terrain that you can communicate with your participants ahead of time. Are you able to use a paved multi-use path versus a gravel track that might not be as accessibility device friendly? Are there stairs or hills to be aware of? And even if you don't have a perfectly accessible space to work with, communicating what factors are there ahead of time is really important so people can plan ahead. Same thing with restrooms. That's always something that I'm thinking about with these experiences is where can people use the bathroom and are those accessible restrooms? Transportation is a big one, thinking about are there other ways to reach the space that you're hosting an event or a program besides a car? That's something to think about. Program promotion, are you reaching the people that you want to invite to this event or program? How are community partners helping promote it? And similarly, what language are you using to describe the program? I use ecotherapy in formal settings like this as an umbrella term for a lot of different practices, but maybe therapy turns people off from wanting to come participate. So what language could you use instead that resonates with your community, like a mindfulness walk or a group nature hike? There are a lot of, again, creative ways that you can be responsive to the needs of those that you're working with. I also want to point out ecotherapy's role in addressing climate grief or climate anxiety. As most of us know, climate change not only affects our physical environment and our safety, but it also affects our emotions in a lot of drastic ways and can influence our sense of meaning and purpose in a world with a sort of uncertain future. And so ecotherapy is a great opportunity for people to connect with not only natural spaces, not only people with a shared emotional experience to them, but also with tools for processing those big feelings and sort of getting what they need out of nature in response to those overwhelming feelings of grief or stress. And that community connection can be really empowering to know that you're not alone in your feelings, not just for processing the feelings, but also taking action on ways that you can address whatever environmental concern you have at the local or global level. It really is helpful for preventing burnout. When you're not the only person and the weight of the world is not on your shoulders, you have that community of people who maybe you practiced your ecotherapy with, and then also can take concrete actions with. And I also want to highlight the beautiful opportunities for cultural connection. There are groups with a shared lived experience or identity, such as their cultural or racial identity, maybe their religious background. Many of those histories or experiences have nature woven into part of that identity in different ways. And so ecotherapy can be an opportunity to dive deeper into those practices and create a greater sense of connection and resilience. So now that we've gotten through the nitty-gritty, I'd love for you to take a second to think about your favorite outdoor space in the place that you live. Maybe this is somewhere that you go to often or somewhere that you've had a great experience or memory. Maybe it's just your backyard or your front porch. So think about, visualize that space, drop that in the chat so you can show that place some love and we can see the different kinds of places that we like to go to experience nature. Local park, beach, farm and woods. Ooh, got a state park in Indiana. Love that. It's near me. Love this front porch swing, camping. I love seeing the variety of experience that are shared here. The veggie garden, the soccer fields. There are like quiet contemplative spaces. There are more active spaces, things that are close by. Turkey Run. I love Turkey Run. Walking trails. Awesome. Thanks y'all for sharing. This just makes me so excited to see the different ways that y'all love to engage with nature where you live. So yeah, I'm glad that we could all visualize that space, and I hope that you can keep that place in mind as we go through some of these case studies of examples of work that we're doing here in Indianapolis, and seeing kind of what ways that your treasured spaces could be used for similar experiences. So this here is a photo of a trail in Eagle Creek Park, and my friend Tony, who leads a lot of these mindful nature walks and experiences, and some of our participants of our first mindful nature walk that we did. So again, this is our park, but a lot of you mentioned parks where you live as well. So solutions will vary depending on what your community needs or is interested in, what resources or spaces you have available. So again, hopefully these can be ideas to tailor to fit your own community or inspire some other changes. This spectrum is something that I like to show to demonstrate that ecotherapy does not have to be complicated. On one end of the spectrum is ideas that are easier to implement. Maybe they cost less money or are faster to get from idea to installation. And then on the other end of the spectrum are projects that need more people power, maybe need more funding, and definitely need more advanced planning and organization. So no matter where you are on the spectrum, you can move along it at any time, which is why I think this is such an exciting and creative space to be in. You can start simple and work from there. It really just depends. And I think an important thing to point out is that no matter what kind of work you do, there is a way for ecotherapy to be part of it, as long as you're creative and flexible about what that might look like. So an example I want to show first that I was not involved in, but inspired by, was a trail, a forest therapy trail in Illinois. So this is the Post Oak Forest Therapy Trail. And my parents were exploring a lot of the parks in Illinois. And about the time that we started working on our mindfulness nature trail at Butler University, they come across this resource and wanted to share the signage with me. So this sign explains what is forest therapy. It talks about some of the benefits of time in the forest. And my favorite part of what they did here is at the end, they mentioned, rest assured, there is no wrong way to enjoy the forest and this trail. Simply being in the forest can help you feel better. Enjoy. And then this sign is the start of the trail, and along the trail, they have different stations where there are signs that have example activities that you can participate in, as simple as close your eyes and take a deep breath. So I was very excited about this project. This was someone who had done what I was hoping to do. I reached out to the park manager and sent probably too many questions, and she was really generous and took the time to respond. And she said, "Thank you for your email. I wish I could cite some amazing scientific study that we referenced for the ecotherapy trail, but I literally just got online to see what others are doing. My strategies for placing the signs consisted of walking on the trail and picking stopping points that I thought would be good stopping points." So I share that just to show that, one, it doesn't have to be complicated. I'm sure that this person was an advocate for this work where she lives and was able to work with her colleagues to get this I guess, amenity or resource installed at their park. But also just to demonstrate that these projects build off of each other and can inspire something new, because this was some research that I was doing as we started building the ecotherapy trails at Butler University. So first case study that I'll talk about is the Ecotherapy Trails and Campus Ecotherapy Guide at my alma mater. Actually, signs just went in the ground this week, so we're really excited about the progress that this project has made. What we have going on at Butler is 2 self-guided nature mindfulness trails. There's one 30-minute trail, which is on accessible paved surfaces, and one 1 hour route that is on more rugged terrain with stairs and some gravel paths. And along these routes, there are signs with QR codes where students can scan, look at instructions, for example, mindfulness activities or reflective prompts that help them move through that space in a more intentional way. There's also a campus ecotherapy guide that includes those activities and breaks it down into kind of the amount of time students have, or if they want to practice with other people or by themselves, inside, off campus. There are a lot of different options there. And then all of these are online now. So if you're curious to see more about what is going on at Butler University, you can Google that, or maybe you can drop the link in the chat later so you can see those resources. The way that this project came about was a committee or a coalition of folks who are interested in ecotherapy, who wanted to create an experience where students can reduce their stress and connect to nature. We know that students experience so much stress for a variety of reasons, along with their lifestyle and expectations. And in addition to that, the Butler University Center for Urban Ecology and Sustainability put out an assessment where they found that 76% of students and 79% of faculty and staff stated that when they think about climate change, they feel negative emotions like depression, anxiety, or anger. And 73% of the students surveyed in that assessment stated that they feel climate change will significantly impact their future. So there's a lot of big feelings here, in addition to the daily stress of being a college student. So we had staff from a couple of different departments, some faculty who provided activities for the ecotherapy guide, as well as student interns and community volunteers like myself, who are all involved in designing this experience. We also got input from the Office of Student Disability Services to help us make sure that our language and the route that we are using were accessible, and even support from the marketing department, who made us maps that looked way better than what we could have done on our own. So the process started with brainstorming. We have this idea, this interest in ecotherapy. We want to help students. What's that going to look like? We went through a long design process. It's been about 2.5 years in the making. And then the evaluation is where we're at now. So we're getting feedback from students via a survey as they're testing out the route, looking at the placemaking and the signage and giving us feedback. So we have temporary signs in the ground now. And then once we have this feedback, we'll make some adjustments and install some permanent signs. So going back to that spectrum of effort and money and time, I would say that this project has been hired staff time to get set up. There's been some funding required in order to pay for the signage. So we've got some physical resources there as well. But we're hoping that this project will be self-sustaining in the future. So although it's taken some planning, it's taken a lot of time and adjustments. Hopefully there'll just be minimal maintenance, and this will be an activity or an experience that students can come back to on their own time and when they need it, well into the future. After this program or project, I got connected with the Eagle Creek Park Foundation and some of the mindfulness work that was happening there. So Eagle Creek Park is a city park here in Indianapolis, and then the Park Foundation is the nonprofit that supports the park. And I want to highlight that collaboration because it was through sharing responsibilities and resources that this project really got off the ground and was made a lot more simple because of that partnership. I'll also say that the former executive director of the foundation, Blair, was really the project champion who got me involved in this project and is continuing to keep it running and make this program accessible to park goers. So what's happening at the park itself is that there are in-person mindfulness hikes twice a month for all ages in the summer months. These are led by trained volunteers. There are 2 guides on each hike, just to make sure that there's that safety aspect and help manage the groups depending on the size. There are 2 accessible routes that are pre-planned for volunteers to take participants on, and we had 50 adult participants in the first season of this program, and we're heading into season 2. The next volunteer training is coming up next weekend, and then the project will start again in June. So again, the partnership between these two organizations is what made this process really smooth. Blair and I have presented this, the Indiana Park and Recreation Association conference, and so I got to hear a lot of the inner workings of her mind as she was going through this project. So guides were recruited using existing volunteers for Eagle Creek Park, people who care about the space and want to be involved in stewarding it. And the park itself already had the infrastructure to help guides go through a background check and an orientation to the history of the park, the layout of the park, and that sort of thing. Additionally, then on the foundation side, Blair hosted a one-day group facilitator training that helped volunteers learn how to manage group dynamics, how to lead different kinds of activities, and to practice walking the routes that would be used for the program. Again, those designated routes were provided to make sure that accessibility was a key. Also make sure that people didn't get lost or go over time on their experiences. And there was one loop that was inside the park, which has a $5 entrance fee, as well as one outside the park in a space that was managed by the park, but at the time did not have an entrance fee. So that removed an additional barrier to participation. Additional logistics, besides recruiting volunteers and going through the training, the foundation handled volunteer registration, getting people signed up for shifts. That was a pretty easy one-time thing. You go through the training, you sign up for your shifts, and then participants were able to sign up online to receive waivers and information about participating on the walks. And there was some promotion via email newsletters and social media during that first season. Blair didn't want to overwhelm the volunteers, so that's something that will be definitely upped going into season 2 to drive greater attendance. The format for these walks, I didn't mention that yet, but just to clarify, usually we'll start with a meeting point, doing some introductions, getting people comfortable with the group. And then the format of the walk is alternating periods of silent walking, where you're observing the space around you, as well as group activities or reflective activities and discussion, where then you can interact with the other participants, share what you've observed, and learn from others. So based off of this experience, myself and a friend and teammate at Indy Community Yoga are expanding where these programs can be offered. So Tony is the founder of Indy Community Yoga, which is a local nonprofit that provides free, accessible yoga and meditation every day of the week with the goal of harm reduction. And Tony and I both went through this training from the Eagle Creek experience. We wanted to build off of that and be able to provide the same experience, different parts of the city for no cost at different times of the year as well. So Blair was really great, got us all trained up, wants to expand this practice. And then we were able to do something similar with our own little spin on it with Indy Community Yoga. So there are 2 free accessible hikes each month for all ages. We've had some families bring their kids, and that adds a little bit of extra fun to the practice. With this format, we have 4 paid walk leaders who are compensated for their time and their planning of the experiences. The way that this works, or this project has worked, is that we took time to brainstorm, explore where we wanted to be holding these experiences, think about what we wanted our participants to feel and experience. And we're at the test and revise stage where we are currently leading 2 walks a month. We're seeing what weather conditions aren't great for people, what times of day aren't great for people's schedules, and revising to make sure that these practices continue to be inviting and engaging for everyone. The walk format is pretty similar to what I explained with the Eagle Creek Park. And then starting next month, we'll be launching a partnership with a nonprofit that maintains some spaces downtown to offer weekly urban mindfulness hikes. And so these will take place in a less natural setting with the goal of helping people see ways that they can practice mindfulness as a mental health support anywhere, and ways that nature is everywhere as well. So just from these examples over the past 2 or 3 years, we can see represented universities, parks, nonprofits of different kinds who are wanting to participate in this movement, offer ecotherapy programs in a way that helps communities come together, reduce stress, and enjoy nature. So throughout these case studies, you'll see that our formula is pretty similar. But if you, again, go online like that park manager at the beginning did, there are a lot of inspiring nonprofits or even individuals who are doing different creative ways to bring groups or advocates together for ecotherapy in their own communities. So again, the more strands that are in that web, the stronger that it is, and the more mental health support that we can provide. Some of the benefits of collaboration, I've mentioned that there are a lot of cross-sector opportunities. Indy Community Yoga has a completely different audience and focus than Eagle Creek Park, but both are able to offer that new experience and that support for folks in our community. There's also so much more knowledge and resources that can be shared when you're working in collaboration with other groups. Again, with that partnership between the park and the foundation at Eagle Creek, the resources were expanded. Their use of volunteers also expanded how often that service can be offered, because volunteers are able to amplify Blair's time, essentially. And then shared knowledge. This photo is of 2 of the other mindful walking guides with Indy Community Yoga and myself exploring on a snowy day. And one of them is an English teacher, one of them is an elementary teacher. And so just seeing the ways that they facilitate groups or the kind of subjects that they want to incorporate in our mindfulness experiences is really inspiring for me as someone without that background. So I've been able to learn and hopefully, I think, improve those experiences based on the shared knowledge that they're able to provide. Again, it's a new community service, reaching new groups that has been able to expand on existing work when you look at our progress from Eagle Creek to expanding into Indy Community Yoga and hopefully beyond that. Again, we want to build that strong ecosystem, and the more people we have doing this work with this framework or mindset, the better. A couple of strategies, things that I've learned throughout this process is, one, as you're getting started, it's important to be open about what your interests are. When I started learning about ecotherapy, I thought, as someone living in the Midwest, this is only something that was happening in the West Coast or the United Kingdom, because that's where I was seeing designated nonprofits doing work with ecotherapy. But the more conversations I had, the more I was opened up to how many people are interested in this work and already doing similar things. And I think that's one of the most exciting opportunities for collaboration, is just being able to get curious and get to know what other people are doing in other parts of not only the world, but your own neighborhood. Listening to participant needs, listening to feedback is also really great. Lesson I've learned. That's something that we're doing with the Butler experience, getting feedback from students who are actually using that resource and seeing what they suggest to improve that experience for them. But also looking at some of the more subtle things, like no one is showing up for our Friday afternoon practice. What is it about Friday afternoons that doesn't work for people's schedules, and when are other times that work better for them? So just being open to those kind of things to continue to tailor that offering. Flexibility is really key. When we started the Butler University project, I had no idea it was going to be 2 years in the making, but now that we're at the point of installing signage, getting feedback, the whole group of people involved is grateful that we took that time so we could refine the resource and end up with a more quality product than we probably would have if we had just rushed into it. I've said it before, look for inspiration and tailor to your situation. Even if you don't have a state park or natural space in your own backyard, there are ways to incorporate ecotherapy indoors or in urban settings too. And lastly, people are excited about this work. I have been so surprised at how many people in my community have said, yes, this is something that we're interested in. And so I'm 98% sure that when you start having these conversations, you'll find someone in your own area that is excited about this work as well. But just because people are excited, I will make the note that to make sure that we're compensating folks for their work and finding mutual sharing opportunities if that funding is not available, in order to help support not only the sustainability of these projects, but the equity in this work as well. So I have my contact information here on the screen, and I'll drop it in the chat in a moment as well. But I, again, really do think that the most exciting part about this work is hearing what others are doing. So if you want to brag about some projects that you already have going on, feel free to shoot me a note. If you are starting to implement something and you want to run an idea by me or have questions, please feel free to reach out about that as well. But just want to make sure that you're able to stay connected with me so that I can hear about the great work that you are doing as well, and appreciate you all taking the time to listen today.
Thank you so much, Marissa. If you want to pop your contact info in the chat too, that would be great. I know a few of you were asking about how to connect with others on this webinar in your own areas, so I encouraged you to put your own contact information in the chat too. I love seeing people doing that and getting connected through this space. We'll take just a few questions that I saw come through. First, thank you for that great presentation and all of the wonderful information. I know it's just such an important topic and so needed in so many communities. And it sounds like so many people that are listening are interested in, engaging in this in their communities or potentially starting it. And so those are a lot of the questions that were coming through of how do I seek out projects that are similar to the ones that you discussed in my own area? And then furthermore, if there aren't any, how do I get started in creating those opportunities for others?
Yeah, absolutely. So for seeking out things that are already happening in your community, my suggestion would be to cast a wide net. There are a lot of ecotherapy programs that might not describe themselves as ecotherapy programs, but at the end of the day, have that component of connecting people with nature. Some of those might be programs already happening in your parks or through your city, county region. Libraries are a really great place to look for this sort of thing. Even in like senior living programs, usually like horticultural therapy is common there, or in hospital settings, and there are ways that that shows up too. So I would say it really involves getting involved at the local level, seeing what's happening within other organizations, and knowing that you're going to have to do a little detective work. It might not be called ecotherapy or nature therapy or even nature-based mindfulness, but there might be similar programs that you can get involved in, and maybe even help folks who are doing similar nature programs add that trauma-informed mental health component to it. As far as starting something new, that also involves casting a wide net, and it involves a little bit of putting yourself out there. So I apologize to all the introverts on the call, but I do think that having conversations with coworkers or people who are involved in similar volunteering opportunities as you starts to plant that seed. Maybe people who didn't know what ecotherapy was before, but definitely know that nature is really nourishing to them, could get excited about that. My path to starting this work was having a conversation with my former internship supervisor, who wrote me a letter of recommendation for grad school, which I didn't even finish the grad school, but I got this project out of it and so much exciting work for the community. So I would say having those conversations, knowing what's interesting to you as well, like maybe mindfulness is not your thing the same way that it is my thing, but gardening is, or hiking is, finding what's authentic to you, finding people who are also excited about those projects, and then building from there. Once you have a couple of people who are also wanting to be champions or advocates for this work is important.
I love those recommendations, and it just reminds me of another question that can be tied into this of if individuals are living in mostly urban spaces where there aren't readily accessible green spaces around them, but they still want to feel connected to nature. Do you have any recommendations for those circumstances too?
Yes. And that is where creativity really comes into play in designing these practices. Some of the challenges that we're facing with our upcoming urban mindfulness hikes is that there are water features here, there are trees here, and there's a lot of concrete and there's a lot of traffic noise. And so for us, the experience we're designing is, reflecting on how does that make me feel versus looking at this tree, how does that make me feel? And so being able to sort of compare and contrast those experiences, also highlighting that nature is everywhere. So even if we do have a parking lot next to us, there is this tree here, and there are a lot of lessons and again, those nature metaphors that you can find from the things that are growing in hard, dry, bright places. I also would say to expand your definition of what nature is. There's a lot of science that shows that even just looking at a nature photo screensaver on your desktop can have some of those same benefits. So bringing flowers, like cut flowers inside, using nature photos for activities with groups. There are opening windows if you're having office hours and having student meetings. There are a lot of different ways that you can look at your indoor space and find ways to add nature sounds or nature imagery, a breeze. It really takes a lot of customization and creativity, but in those spaces, don't be afraid to bring nature inside or focus on the little things that are nature, even in an urban environment.
Yeah, I love those suggestions and just such a great reminder that there's the little things in our daily routine that you can even change to bring it into your own life or into those that you're working with or spending time with. I know even just feeling that sunlight on your face sometimes can make such a difference in your day, or hearing the noise from outside, if your window's open, feeling the breeze, all of those things, and then being intentional about accepting those and taking time to process. So I love that. A more specific question that came through from someone regarding your walks and hikes is, have you found that there's a recommended length or time that seems to be most effective or what best for people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that thoughtfulness there. We've been experimenting, as I mentioned, taking feedback not just from our participants, but also from ourselves and how we felt leading the experience. We have found, since there is a discussion and reflection component to the walks that we lead, that 1 hour is too short. People arrive late. We want to do introductions and have time to get to know the people who are also interested in these activities and participating with you. We're walking really slow so that we can take in the natural phenomenon around us. And then in order to have enough time to not have those conversations be rushed, or for people to feel they can open up and share their reflections, we found that 1 hour is too short. For the length of walk that we do, we usually do about an hour and a half. But I feel like I've seen somewhere that the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, I think is the acronym, does 3-hour experiences. So it again depends on how much time you have and are willing to dedicate to this. Maybe the age or the energy and ability ranges of the people that you're working with. So I would say from our formula, 1 hour is too short. 1.5 hours is our sweet spot, but it does depend on where you're at too.
Yeah, sure, that completely makes sense. And like you said, depending on population and age and all those different things, it can make a difference. But I think the importance of these types of activities is the intentionality behind it and being in nature and appreciating it, which takes time. So you don't want to feel rushed. So I like that suggestion there. I see we have one more question that just came through about scientific journals or articles on benefits of ecotherapy or time in nature. There are so many out there, and more that are even coming out to show those connections and impacts. And so, Marissa, if you have any in particular, feel free to share those with me, and I can share them out with the group in our follow-up materials, so that you all can read up more on that. But any additions to that question?
So another person from my cohort for the Young Mental Health Leaders Council shared with me that Nature Journal does have a Nature Mental Health edition. I haven't had a chance to sit down and read it yet, but that is, I think, in its first year of publication this year. I know that that's a esteemed publication. I'll also say the book that kind of got me on this journey was The Nature Fix by Florence Williams. Sorry, my bookshelf's over here, so make sure I get the author's name right. But that has her experience traveling around the world to see research that's happening in the mountains, in cities in Japan, to identify some of those more specific ways that our body interacts with nature. So that's a not super academic language one that I recommend to get started with.
Absolutely. I see a few people adding in suggestions there too.
Yeah,
Thank
love
you
it.
all. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I know we're nearing the end of our hour, and I just want to say thank you so much to Marissa. Any final thoughts or notes you want to leave the group with today after our session?
Again, just appreciate you taking the time to be here. Appreciating seeing the hearts and the comments in the chat, because it invigorates me to know that there are people who are also excited about this and doing good work elsewhere. So I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, for your thoughtfulness, your comments, your questions, your suggestions, and your interest in this topic. And so we just appreciate you all being here. We hope that you have time in these next few days approaching Earth Day to connect with nature, spend some time outside, connect with nature in the ways that feel right for you and that you're able to. So thank you all, and thank you, Marissa. We so appreciate your insights today.
Thanks, everyone. Happy early Earth Day.
Yes, of course. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.